Guys, what are we looking at today? Well, you can see on the table in front of you, there are a handful of out-the-front knives. Two of them are autos. One of them is my Exo Gravity knife, which technically still is an out-the-front knife. We are going to talk about some of the problems with these out-the-front knives. They do pose some problems. They're great, they're fun, everybody loves them because they're cool, but there are some limitations and drawbacks on them. So with no further ado, let's turn this around and we'll talk about it and look at it from above. All right, guys, like I said in the intro, out-the-front knives are about as much fun as you're gonna have with a knife, period. They are a lot of fun, and none of the things I'm about to say detracts from that. I still love them. So these are both autos, and this is a gravity knife. Now, an out the front is simply that. It comes out a slot in the front of the knife as opposed to a folding knife that typically opens this direction sideways and the blade sits in a slot. So that being said, now we got nomenclature out of the way, but you can see that you have some definite limitations. So let's go ahead and we're going to look at some of the things that are not great about out the front knives, either autos or gravity knives. So we're going to use this one as an example for the first one. So the first one is going to be blade shape. Now, I do know there are some knives that break this little rule, but typically what you're going to get with an out the front is you're going to get a very slender blade, usually either a dagger style or like this one, which is a double tonto. They call this the Spartan blade. You'll have tontos or something like this is a drop point. Now, I just took everything off the table from that last because I wanted to have a transition. But yeah, you're really kind of shaped because the fact is, unlike a folding knife, where you can get away with having a blade that has a broader diameter than your handle or broader cross section than your handle, like this. This blade is actually wider than this handle, but because it falls in there, you can get away with that. You can have more blade on the outside. You can also see it on this, this Tough Late Mini. You can see that that blade is actually broader than the handles. You can't do that with an out the front, because it has to be able to go through this slot. Now, I've seen ones that do have the different blade shape. There's a couple out the front karambits, but the problem you run into with those is the broader and weirder that blade shape, the broader the handle. So every time you, any little bit that you widen this blade, you also then have to consider that is going to be wider on both sides of the handle. So you get into some issues where you wind up with an uncomfortable handle shape. So you're pretty limited with some of these blade shapes, like this tonto on this. Now, that leads us to another problem you're going to run into with these in a little bit. But yeah, you can't have the diversity of blade shapes that you can in out the side knives. Now, an out the side auto, absolutely, you can have pretty much any blade shape you want because it's just like one of these, except it's got a spring in it that automatically flips it out instead of using your flipper. So you can get away with having a broader or unique shaped blade in an out the side auto that you can't on these. So you're pretty limited. Like I said, tontos, you can get drop points and things like that, as long as they're pretty straight and narrow. So they're never going to have a lot of belly. They're not going to come transition down and have a big swept tip like a drop point or a clip point. You're going to pretty much have these pretty straightforward blades like this drop point here. This is a great, great blade. Don't get me wrong. This is a great blade. It cuts really well. It's been dimensioned well. It does a great job on this knife. But if you wanted something that had a different blade shape, you really couldn't do it in an OTF without giving up a little bit of the comfort that you're going to have by having a slim handle. Like I said, the curved karambit ones with the wider blades are definitely wider handles. So that's the first issue. So let's look at the next problem that you can run into with autos. Out the fronts, not necessarily just the autos. The next problem is you get limited, really limited in blade geometry on these. I just did a video we saw a couple days ago where I was talking about blade and edge geometry. On these, because you have to usually have a fairly narrow blade, you wind up with, sometimes you don't have the transition on the blade stock to have a nice thin and slicey blade. This is more for piercing. This one is kind of an exception. Riat did a really good job with this. This is a little bit larger, a little bit broader, and they did a really good job transitioning this, but this still is not super thin behind the edge. And that's because you are limited on what you can do. They could have made this a full flat grind and not had the flat up here, but you're really limited. And then on something like this, which is basically a modified dagger, which is two Tontos put together, you have the thick ridge in the middle, and you don't have, with typically with most daggers, especially ones that are thin like this, you just don't have real good edge and blade geometry for slicing. Like I said, this is mostly for piercing. Now, they're great, they're fun, and if you were trying to carry this, you can do some cutting with this. This knife is extremely sharp. It just isn't as slicey. You have some limitations on what you can do as far as cutting horsepower. So when it comes to the cutting horsepower, you kind of have an issue. So there's your second one, the blade limitations on edge geometry if you're still using fairly thick blade stock. So let's move on to the next problem that I have had with that I find with a lot of out the fronts. This next one pertains only to the out the front autos, because absolutely on this one, I'm not going to have that problem. This one is very, very basic. There's no mechanism I have to worry about. And that's cleanliness of these knives. So we all know that when your knife gets dirty, your action can get gritty, it can get bad. On a button lock auto or a button lock flipper like this, it's not an issue. I take this knife apart, I clean it. I don't know if you've noticed, these knives have got proprietary hardware. I don't have the tools for this. So this knife is going to get dirty, and it's going to get dirty because that opening there is down in your pocket and stuff gets up inside, and you really don't have a way to clean it. There's some ways you can take this off and then spray brake cleaner out and then re-lubricate your knife. But to get it a good clean, you really need the specific hardware, or you're going to have to send it back to Microtech to clean it, or you're going to have to spend the exorbitant amount of money that they want for the hardware. So the problem with that is when these knives get dirty, these ones are very, very picky about how much grit they will tolerate. If this gets dirty, it does not want to deploy. And so you have to come up with some ways like you can keep lubricating it, but the problem is the oil is now inside and it leaks out through the seams and out the back. And so unless you've got a way to get something down in there to clean it, you're going to run into problems. And then if there's a mechanical issue, you have got to be able to take it apart. Now, I do know most autos, other than the Microtechs, you can take apart. I'm just saying the cleanliness and getting dirt down in there, it can be a pain. And even to getting dirt underneath the button, it can cause some issues. So the second it gets dirty, you lose that beautiful snappy action that you get in your out the front, because now it's got dirt and grit. And the other thing too is if you use an oil that's a little heavier than what's recommended, like I use the KPL Ultralight, you can have that get gummy down in there if you use something other than like the REM oil or like the Ultralight KPL, and it gums up. I've tried to use nano oil on these, and it gets sticky as it evaporates out, and it gets sticky and it gums up, and it slows these knives down to where it's going to not completely deploy. It's not going to do that. It's absolutely going to cause problems. So there you go. Cleanliness and maintaining these. That's the second issue I kind of have with them. The next issue is going to pertain to every out the front, unless it is a Grant and Gavin Hawk deadlock, which is the only knife that's ever got a perfect rating on this channel, ever. It is perfect. It is absolutely perfect. There is nothing you can say that's wrong about that knife. This is a problem that is really, really prevalent in all OTFs. There's a lot of wobble because they have to have enough room for that mechanism and rail and slide to go up cleanly and not hit anything. So that one has it. And then even this one. They all have it. All out the fronts I've ever handled, with the exception of the Grant and Gavin lock out the front auto, the deadlock is it is going to happen in all these knives. Now, you just kind of understand that that's going to be the thing. And does it hurt anything really on these? No, it doesn't. They're kind of designed that way to have a little bit of slop in them. And, it's not horrible, but it's much more than I would accept on a folding knife. You see what I'm saying? Like I will make exceptions to what I'll accept because I understand the mechanisms on these knives. But that doesn't mean that I like it. I absolutely wish that every out the front was like the deadlock, where it was just locked in, it was solid, there was no play, and they're just amazing. But these, I have to make some concessions because I understand. And then, I mean, this one's just fun. This one's just fun. It's not something I would carry. This is not like something you can throw in your pocket. So there is that one. The next issue we're going to bring up is something that only happens occasionally on some knives. I've actually had to have it. I've had it happen on Microtex, but that's something we're going to talk about in the next one, which is the required tolerances for that blade deployment. This knife, when I got it, you see, even though there's some grooves in here, when I got this knife, until I sharpened it a couple times, this, I think it was, yeah, this side would get dull every time. Every time I deployed it, it was dragging on something internally. I talked to Microtech, I told him about it, but I had already solved the issue because I sharpened it a couple times because it kept getting dull on me. So it would absolutely just be dull all the way down that whole edge on this side. And it's because I don't know what happened, but it was touching up against the side. If the tolerances, I never had an issue with this one. I never had that issue with this one. If your tolerances are off in how that moves back and forth inside and out, if it's canted in any way and it drags on something, it's just going to knock the edge right off of this. Even though aluminum, which is what these handles are made out of, is much softer than the Elmax steel on these, you're still going to have that. You're going to have that issue if it rubs up against aluminum. Metal is still metal. I don't care how much softer it is than the steel on a knife. You're still going to run into some issues if it's rubbing in there. So if it's off at all a little bit, it will drag. Now this one, they came up with a clever way of preventing that. Well, it's not clever. It's just this rail completely keeps it locked in place and doesn't allow it to touch the sides. Even if you happen to clamp down on this while it's in mid-travel, it doesn't change the position of that blade. It absolutely is not going to be an issue on this Reat Exos. But I've seen some of these that have that problem. So there you go. And then the last one we're going to talk about, the legalities and stigma that go along with the majority of out the fronts. You can get out the fronts that are not considered automatics or switchblades, but the majority of them are. And there's a stigma that doesn't deserve to be, it doesn't deserve to be on them. They're illegal a lot of places. They're on a federal ban. You can't ship these through the mail technically. You can't travel with these from state to state because they're a federally prohibited item. Even there's a lot of states that allow you to carry them now. Federally, these are still considered a prohibited item. You're allowed to own them. You just can't carry them most places. So there's a lot that goes with that can just be a complete pain. And there's no real reason for it. It doesn't make any sense in my book. It's no different. That knife is no different or no more dangerous than this knife is in its way of deployment. It's not like you can put this up against somebody and push the button. Absolutely cannot do that because they have a derail system that I've demonstrated a bunch of times. But there's just a stigma that goes with these. Gravity knives and out the front autos have been illegal. All switchblades have been illegal for so long, and there's just no real reason for it. That's one of the things, well, since we're talking about it, if you don't support knife rights, you should, because they fight to get rid of some of these silly arcane laws. But yeah, it's absolutely, there is no real reason for it, but they've been stigmatized and made illegal in so many places that it just, for a lot of people, it's like, you know what? It's just easier for me not to carry them. So, you know, it's just ridiculous. So there was a handful of reasons. There's a handful of problems I found with switchblades and out the front autos, out the fronts in general. Not all out the fronts are autos. Not all places are they illegal. But it's just like, these are just some of those things that you run into with these knives. Most of them that I talked about were just functional issues that you're just going to run into with these knives. So guys, let's turn it around, do some final thoughts, and send you out about your day. There you go, guys. Like I said, they do have some limitations, and some of them could be deal breakers for some people. I still love them because they're fun. They're cool. This Exo Gravity knife, like I said at the very beginning, that I showed at the very beginning of the video, is absolutely one of my favorite knives of all time. I love this thing for its fidgety factor. It is probably the best gravity knife ever, but they definitely have some little minor drawbacks. So that being said, guys, that's the end of the video. If you like the videos, give them a thumbs up. If you don't like them, give them a thumbs down. Please try to tell me why. I can't change the content if you don't tell me what you don't like. If you want to support the channel, it's as simple as like, share, subscribe, drop a comment, hit the bell icon. Those are the best ways. That like button is the best thing you can do for any channel. If you're watching a video on one of your channels that you like and you have watched it for 15 seconds and you have not hit the like button, you're doing that channel a disservice, because that absolutely is the best thing you can do for a channel. If you do want to support the channel financially, however, there's a handful of ways. I've got a ton of affiliate links down below. All of the Amazon ones are basically just a gateway to my affiliate store. Anything you purchase after you get past that initial click absolutely supports the channel, and it doesn't have to be the item you clicked on. So if you're looking for batteries or beach towels, go find one of my affiliate links, do your Amazon shopping that way. Coffee Brand Coffee, I have a 5% discount with that affiliate link, or you could just go to their website and type in CrazySharp, all one word. That's a 5% discount on some of the best coffee on the market. And I have a membership down below. It's all tier-based. Everyone has access to my Gilded server, which is just like Discord. Baseline and premium members are automatically entered into the giveaways that I do on the Gilded server. I think I'm going to start doing those about once a quarter, because it's really hard to keep enough stuff here for that level of giveaways. And the premium guys have access to a sharpening tutorial series here on YouTube. So that's it on this one, guys. I love you all. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. Keep it clean in the comments section, and I will see you in the next video.